Well, welcome, whatever time of the day or night it is. Welcome to ECIS Foundations for Life, Assuring Quality in the Early Years Strategy and Practice with the lovely Fiona Carter, who's going to be facilitating for us today, who's the Director of Education at Wellington College International. We're absolutely thrilled that Fiona is going to be facilitating this session today and enjoy very much our partnership with Wellington College International and the work that we do with Fiona. So welcome to those of you who've been able to join this morning. As I say this morning, it's this morning in Europe, and for many of you, you're probably in places that it's this afternoon or this evening. Absolutely lovely to see you here. The session is being recorded, so other people that have registered will be able to jump on the recording at another time. We'd love to know where you're calling in from, so do put a little introduction in the chat. Some of you are old friends of ECIS and the Early Childhood Special Interest Group. Lindsay Breeks also on this call today, and she's the chair of the group. And some of you, as I say, are old friends of the group, and some people new to this circle. So absolutely lovely that you're here. I'm going to hand you over to Fiona Carter. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you very much, and hello everybody. Yes, it's great to hear where people are from and see where people are from. I'm currently in Pune in India. You can probably see the glorious sunshine through my hotel window that I'm hoping to get out in a bit later on. We'll see. We're building a new school here in Pune and we're mid-project. So if I keep referring to project plans, it's kind of because it's my life at the moment. It's our first school in India, first of 4, we hope. So it's very exciting, and we're meeting this weekend lots of Indian educators at the TACI conference. So if you're in on the call, then please come and give me a poke or a wave when I'm there this weekend. Yeah, I'm the Director of Education for Wellington International. You'll also see lots of the photographs and images are from China, because we have 6 schools at Wellington, China, and I lived there for about 4 years. I've just come back to be based in England. And we also have a school in Thailand. At the moment, I'm based in what I always call the mothership, which is the Wellington College in England, which actually has nothing to do with early years. It's a traditional boarding school, 160 years old, for 13 to 18-year-olds. Hence them wanting a director of education who looks after early years and primary. So that's my bag. I will say we've only got an hour for quality of provision and foundations for life, according to Fiona, which isn't very long, probably good for you, it's not very long. Right at the end, I will have my contact details. So I'm really happy for people to email me afterwards, ask about something that puzzles them or they agree with or don't agree with, or if ever I'm in your part of the world, we can touch base. I've got a slide here very quickly about the wonderful ECIS. I came across ECIS, I think probably about 12, 13 years ago, when I used to work for an organization called Early Excellence, and was impressed then. I then touched base with them again about a year ago because I was doing a piece of work which included American schools, and I wanted an organization which really was global, which often doesn't include America. And lo and behold, they do, and they did. So I'm delighted to be part of them. Something that may be of interest if you don't know yet is that we have established, very early days, a special interest group around early years. So there's lots of stuff going on for there as well. And I'm sure there's a link on the website to take you to the kind of things that are happening and how you can contribute. This whole hour really for me is about what makes a successful learner. We often talk about a learner for life, or we talk about, and at first when I spoke to ECIS about this, I think I was sitting with Cam having a cup of tea and I was spouting off about foundations for learning and for school. And actually it's beyond that. It's for life. And I think all of us know of either family members, colleagues, people we work with who occasionally have fallen, often because of some of the key ingredients I'm going to talk about here today. So you guys have got a big job. And whether or not you are a class teacher, you're a teaching assistant, you lead early years, or you lead a school, the impact you have in early years education really does give children that resilience to disadvantage as they grow. And I'm just going to cover today what I would view as the key ingredients for that. I will say some of you will have all of these already, with knobs on and hopefully it's reassuring. Some people might think there are certain aspects which they don't do well enough, and that's where the strategy comes in. You know, early years, bearing in mind as school leaders, we'll always say early years cost me a lot of money, and it does because there's lots of us, lots of equipment, lots of resourcing, all of those kind of things. But it is just the best investment a school can make. But it does mean that if strategically you want to change your practice, it needs to come from the highest level, because operationally there will be big decisions to make. And all based on this view of the research we know that talks about brains not being built, or being built rather, and not being born. And if we go back to, as I referred at the beginning, that project plan, for me it is, when I was thinking about this the other day, if we want the outcome at the end of what we've done for our children to be fulfilled, resilient, self-regulated humans who are a fish in water in their life, they will have knockbacks, they won't be happy all the time, we're not. But if we can instill in children that I say resilience to disadvantage, to falling, supporting well-being proactively rather than it being intervention, then that's what we need to do in that project plan. And so we need to backpedal and think about the key ingredients for that. Now, I often use Professor Ferraleva's concept of care width. If any of you know Leuven and have worked with the Leuven scales, you will know he refers to this. I would call it the heat lamp. And it's just a really, really useful tool as a check and balance for your provision and for what you are offering your children. And to be honest, when I will use this when I do school improvement, learning walks, inspections, pupil progress meetings, chats with teachers in a group. How do we know our children are thriving? The children under that heat lamp are thriving. Whatever you're doing for them, they are a fish in water. And that means we are optimizing those teaching and learning conditions. The children who are right at the edge, the ones with the very sad faces, for whatever reason, we're not getting it right. And things aren't, the connections are not being made in their world. Now, most of the children in your care will be the sad-faced children occasionally, but not all the time. But there will be some children who aren't. Often, if you're getting into this time of year, term 2, there's a particular reason for that. But I want you to consider those children at the edge with the flat mouths. They're really important too. They're those children who are just okay. They're kind of bumbling along. They are, if you like, on red, amber and green, they're the ambers. But what I would say is that's just not good enough. We need somehow to pull those children back under that heat lamp. And I'm aware as much as you are that we are slightly in a bubble in our schools. We can't influence everything that happens in a child's life. But what we do need to do is consider those conditions for teaching and learning to ensure as much as possible they're coming back under that heat lamp. And right towards the end, I will talk to you about assessment, because I think that's where it's crucial. It's also about, reducing the risk, being proactive in what we do to reduce the risk for children not thriving. Now, I've got 5 points here. My first point there, attachment. Honestly, I think next time I might just fill the screen with attachment. Attachment, 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 whatever age of child you have. But in early years, of course, we do build that toolkit that if attachment is lost, that sense of belonging, the sense of security isn't as strong when they're slightly older. We've built all those brain pathways to make sure that they can help fix themselves. And I think in attachment, again, I was thinking about this the other day. My daughter has lived overseas for a good few years and been in China since she was 12/13. She's now in her second year of university. Without a doubt, she has wobbled going into her second year. And Betha and I talk about it a lot and wondered, thinking, what is it? Is it this? Is it this? I honestly think it's because she's lived overseas for such a long time. She doesn't feel attached to England and to students who've only lived in England. And it's interesting because all her close friendship group, and she's British, none of them are British. They've all lived overseas. So that attachment to her tribe, where she feels that they know each other, that sense of belonging, that has been very important. And so as much as possible, we need to think about this list and how we're supporting these essential ingredients in our settings. language and communication, we know a confident communicator has much greater life chances than a child who is not a confident communicator. Now, many of our children in international schools actually are confident communicators in 2, 3, or 4 languages. So, but it is important that we, and I'll talk about later on, intentionally plan for communication, for conversations. Many years ago, I did large-scale projects in England on what we called narrow the gap in schools of real deprivation. And I remember one head teacher talking to me, and I have to say I stole his idea. I did give him credit for it, but I stole the idea of 5 a day. 5 meaningful conversations a day with children, with eye contact. That's not managerial or kind of procedural conversations or chats or talk, conversations, and considering how we do that in school. Health and strength. Many of your children will have specialist PE teachers. Fantastic, great. How often do we as teachers, are we in those sessions? How often all the aspects that we talk about, time for reflection in sessions, the learning environment, children knowing exactly where things are and how to be in control of them. How often does that happen in other aspects of the curriculum? Well-being, I'm a convert, I'll be honest with you. I am a convert to an explicit well-being curriculum. Now, that might look slightly different when they're little, but absolutely, I think that's important. We need to plan into the curriculum for it to be preventative rather than reactive. Obviously, very much in the context of where you are. And I am going to talk a bit later about knowledge, skills and curriculum, because I think that's really important in early years. And I think it's kind of been a bit missed. Some early years people will say I'm wrong and they don't believe in it. But I think, again, I've been a bit of a convert over the last few years and felt that that's important. And as I've said at the bottom, just keep checking the project plan. And I'll talk a little bit about assessment and how we do that further on. You know, as Lillian Katz would say, it really is about the foundations and finding out as much as we can about the soil on which we are building. Again, referring to the building we're doing at the moment. Finding out as much as we know about our children. Now, I expect you do know a lot about your children. In terms of how you report upwards in your schools, is that contextual information taken seriously? Is it assessed? Is it reported around maybe well-being and involvement, maybe the children's level of engagements, the level of language, the level of challenge they have at home as much as they have here? Finding out the forces that are acting upon them. If our children are not under that heat lamp, what is it? I always think of it a bit like almost like a filter. There's a child who's puzzling you. And remember, these are the children as well who look bored. These are not just the children who may have a very explicit learning difficulty. These are the children who, for whatever reason, are kind of plateauing. We did a piece of work actually with Matthew Savage a while ago in one of our schools in Shanghai, and we looked at levels of well-being and involvement against children's progress in certain areas. First, we looked at all the areas of the EYFS. I then said, can we just look at English? Because most of our children in our international school in Shanghai are first language Chinese children, although they may have international passports. What we found was the children who came in with good levels of English, so they came in at doing well, doing okay, kept at that. They didn't go up. They weren't extended. They didn't go beyond. And then we triangulated that with levels of involvement. And what did we see? Involvement was average. So we were so focused on supporting those children who came with no English, we kind of let go. They'd become a bit invisible, the children who not English as a first language particularly, but who were more confident in English. So we had to find the forces that were acting upon them to get them back under that heat lamp. And I want you to think about how you find this out now in your school, and absolutely how you report it and how you share it. And you know, over the years of working with Ofsted, of working with inspection groups across the world, and working with great educators, there are a few little sayings, a few mantras, I suppose, that have stuck with me. And one of them is this: what is it like to be a child here? From the minute you enter, what's it like? Do people make eye contact with me? Does everybody? Am I given the time which I need? Or actually, is everyone else given the time? I don't need as much time. I need to go and do something else and do something independently. those relationships and that image of the child that often we refer to, does everybody have that same image of the child as a competent, capable, curious learner? You know, when children start to walk, and of course they fall down the first time, they don't then say, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to bother. They carry on. They are born resilient with strong characteristics of active learning. We cap them. We cap them if we're not careful by the relationships or lack of relationships sometimes, by not knowing what's their thing. What's their thing that at home, or that's something about, or something they don't know about. I also, you know, over the years I've talked about following their interests. Well, they might not know what they're interested in yet. So again, that comes about the curriculum. It comes about you bringing your interests in, because your ambitions, your passion for something, well, absolutely will wash off on children. The learning environment is critical, and to be honest, I believe it contributes to learning up to 18-year-olds, but in early years it really is critical, where we have children who may be non-verbal, who need to be able to be independent, do their own thing, know where things are without relying on an adult. And again, I'll talk about the principles of a learning environment, what I look for it to be a really outstanding, enabling environment. I would also just point out here about using children's first language. If you are, and if many of you are in Southeast Asia, it's likely that most of your children, even if it's in an international school, do not have English as a first language. So let's take our school in Bangkok. Almost all of our children are Thai nationals. And so all of our teaching assistants will speak and English as well. Now, if we are a British international school, whereby we promise our parents that is the language of instruction. But if we look at that list, if we want to nurture relationships, if we want to really know our children, we need to be sensitive to there are times of the day when it's much more appropriate, efficient, effective, impactful to speak in their own language, to reassure them, to support, to find out what they know. They might actually know loads about dinosaurs, but because they're not speaking, they don't know those words. Doesn't mean they don't know it. Doesn't mean they don't know it. Now, we've again in Shanghai International, we're developing a dual language program, and we have bilingual schools. Most of our schools aren't like that. So it's not about abandoning the levels of English, but it is about being sensitive to the times when children really need that first language, to find out about them and to enable them to use that learning environment, to know whatever the equipment is, what is it? How do I use it? I often think, and I'll talk a bit later about the environment, but about learning environments, often in many schools internationally, the home corner looks like a 1930s kitchen with cups and saucers. Now, I'll be honest, I really like a cup rather than a mug, but that's by the by. But do our children know? Well, now in China, our children know what a teapot is, because making tea is a real ritual. They won't know it in another part of the world. So let's go to them. Let's not fight what we know about child development. Let's embrace it and build on it. An example that's come to mind about relationships and adults and knowing children and supporting their well-being. I was privileged to go to a school in Belgium a few years ago, and because I was working on the Leuven scales, and it was winter. And as we entered the school, the children were coming in as well, all in their coats. So we're called the usual hullabaloo, taking your coat off, your wellies off, you've forgotten your wellies, you want to say goodbye to dad, but he'd gone already, all that stuff that goes on. They had this wonderful technique of they had a basket of warm pebbles, really warm pebbles. So the beginning of the day was a key time for teaching and learning and fostering relationships and attachments. So when the children came in, they were given a warm pebble to hold. And then they came and sat down on the carpet for the morning meeting. Now, 1 or 2 children put the pebble down. Most of them held on to it. And and in the summer, they do the same with cold pebbles to cool the children down. So we certainly 1 or 2 schools in China, I know, adopted that. Taking the time strategically and then in practice for it to matter. That, to me, that's the difference between a very good and an excellent school. It's that going the extra mile to make sure that you really do it. You know, and as I've said, routines which focus on relationships, really meaningful transitions. Are they necessary? Do we really have to line up before we go somewhere else? We might do, but we might not. Wait time in conversations. Now, I warn you, I could and I won't talk for at least an hour about snack time, because such a big part of what we do in across all age, but particularly in early years, fostering relationships, knowing children, getting chit-chatting, all that. It's a really stress-free situation. Really know about your children. Interests are recognised, feelings are considered, what they like, they don't like is valued. And yet, how many snack times are not supported by an adult? Now, I do firmly believe that everyone sitting down and eating at the same time around a carpet and waiting for child number 20, who takes at least half an hour to finish their snack before we go outside, is not a thing. But in self-service snack, which absolutely I promote, choice, motivation, knowing about children, independence, great. But most of our schools most schools I go to, including our own schools, so absolutely, we've really got to focus on communication, language and development. And yet meal times, adults are standing up and not sitting next to children and communicating and sharing. So I know this is really practical, but it's how you get that in from your strategy in practice. What does it look like? And does everybody understand that? You know, language learning, the ideal conditions, it's hard. It's hard. We know that impactful interactions, meaningful interactions are probably the key difference in a good, very good and excellent setting. We know that builds brains. If ever you've seen the work of Kathy Hamer, who talks about the links between attachment and language, it's phenomenal. She was an ex-midwife who wrote about this. But it's not easy. I truly believe it has to be planned for, systems and processes for reflection with children. How often in our classrooms, me included, were book corners an occupying area, a waiting area? How often did I, as the teacher, sit there and read stories and read books and look through books with children in the library on non-fiction walk? How often did I do that? That time, that arm around the child, the attachment, the language, intentionally planning it. And quality, it's all the research tells us that it's quality that makes the difference, not the number of interactions, but quality. And early years can be dominated, as we said, by teacher talk, overtly directive and unresponsive language. It's hard. If young children are not responding to you in the language you understand, if they are going through that slightly silent phase of just, please leave me alone because I just want to crack on with this. You know, I'm building this amazing Lego model. I don't want to draw a plan of it. Thanks. I'm all right. That we know it's hard. And yet we're always being told about sustained shared thinking. And if there's nothing coming back, that's hard. It's hard not to be lots of closed questions. But that kind of teacher language is very closely associated with restricted and less complex language used by children. In contrast, you know, if children receive frequent examples of language models, their development is enhanced. So I would urge you to monitor the kind of language that's used in your classrooms. And it doesn't have to be part of a learning walk. It's part of your reflection, daily reflection. One school I was in did a great thing. They had a big piece of paper, whiteboard paper, and they drew areas in the room, said the sand area, the water, various things. And then they ticked off how many times there was a meaningful conversation between children and adult child in that room, and monitored it, audited it. And for instance, water play. Now, when children are in water play, highly engaged, mathematical, physical, scientific, they often don't really chat. They don't say, I wonder how many cups it will take to fill this teapot. They crack on and they do it, but. So it doesn't mean, though, that we leave that. It means that then we think about the intentional talk that we need to do in that area next week, that real objective-led planning for certain children. So consider how you do that now. List there, and I'm very happy, Sarah, to leave these slides for people if it's helpful. Just a list there of very intentional approaches. You guys will be using things as well. suppose one I'd really, I mean, once a great colleague of mine, Jude Twarney, if ever you get to be in any of her training, she's fabulous. She won't mind me saying this, she's a bit bonkers, but she's fabulous. She talked about talking tires. And a teacher said, can you tell me how to do a talking tire? And being Jude, she said, you can see a tire there, you sit in the tire and you chat. That's it. That's it. Conversation, that tennis of conversation, it's that builds brains for young children. Story scribing is great. What I haven't added on there actually is drawing club, something that Greg Bottrell talks about a lot. Some of our teachers went to some of his training pre-COVID, and then we adapted it to how that should look in our bilingual settings, and it's been brilliant. So intentionally planned ways to encourage children to talk. I don't know if anybody's used blanks levels in this way. It's often used, verbal reasoning is often used with older children, brilliant with young children. This again came from a great friend, a colleague of mine, Charlene Carrott, who helped open the GEMS Founders Schools in Dubai. And we've, again, stolen this idea, nothing like bagpiping. And it's brilliant for objective-led planning in our multi-international, multilingual settings. Thinking about children, and certainly where they first started it, I'm sure they have a very fancy electronic way of doing it now. They had children's names. So in blank level 1, there would be the children who were at that level, and then they would move all the way up to 4, match +1, talking tables, all those great speech and language techniques that therapists use that we use in our classrooms every day, and then monitoring that. But it's very specific planning that everybody in the room knows about, wherever they are, with snack time, outdoor play, to really get children using language in as a sophisticated way as possible. Okay, curriculum. Now, this might be controversial. It might not be as controversial now as it would have been a few years ago. Do we need a curriculum in the early years? Now, I'm hoping if you're in the room, I want you to shout, yes. Some of you might say no, but yes, I absolutely think we do. And I don't think I used them and developed them well enough in the years before. I think it was a bit of a dirty word in the early years. I think it's very important. I think we have a pledge to our children that we have an overall picture of where they're heading. What skills, knowledge, attitudes, behavioural characteristics do they need to go to that next age phase? Now, absolutely, I do not mean a descriptive thematic curriculum, because I think that caps learning, that does the opposite. But I think, we don't look at a child using a drop-down tick box and think, okay, they can do that, so now I'll do the next step. Oh, crikey, but they actually haven't. They can't do that yet. So do I go backwards? Am I going upwards? We know children don't develop in that linear fashion, particularly in the younger age range. But if we are, as educators, I'm a firm believer in a values-based curriculum. And if I go into a school and I see a mission statement or as values on their website, saying they're talking about ecosystems, sustainability, global citizenship, and yet that's not taught explicitly in the curriculum from age 2 or 3. I went to a great school in California a few months ago, and they had a gardening curriculum from age 2 to 18. Imagine how fabulous that is. And how engaged that is. So actually, it's not by chance. We believe, as an educator in my school and in my context, because remember, it'd be different in whichever part of the world you're in, that's important. We have a prep school in Crowthorne, which if you might not know Berkshire at all, but it's very leafy where we are, and it's surrounded by woods, Bracknell Forest. In that school, they don't have to teach den building. Children will naturally, they know about homes, they want to, because when they're young, that's a real predictable interest, and they're surrounded by woods. At the weekend, they probably go out and build a den. It's not that we don't do it, but it doesn't really need to be in the curriculum. If you are in one of our schools in China, where everything around our school, we have beautiful outdoor areas, but very manicured. Our Chinese families believe very strongly in nature and children being outside, but there is no way they would be in a park and they can dismantle a tree and build a den. It just doesn't happen. So in our curriculum there, and I'll be honest with you, we haven't done it yet, we're developing it. They need to learn about, that's my charter to the children. I'm going to show you the joys and the fabulousness of den building And I'm going to show you how to do it. And it will be slightly different according to the age of the child. And there we'll do it in a bamboo forest. So it's something that if you are in a culture where children bake at home, it's natural, it's in the curriculum, but it's not the most important thing. It's about us filling in those gaps and having that overall direction and pace, that checkpoint where if back to my project plan, if by the end of this year, to have really given our children those foundations, ideally they can do this and this, they know this and this, and they're really up for having a go at this and this and this, and they are able to concentrate, persist, have a go. Well, we've got to plan how to do that top level curriculum. And that vision is important. But then I have a strong belief that then your local team, as a team where you are, you develop it yourselves according to your context. You know, learning and development doesn't just unfold. We have to take it further. And I would say if you do use development matters, oh, and I would say the picture on the back there, that mongrel curriculum from Julian Grenier is a really great, the stuff that he does, and his book recently is a really great read because he talks about this. And, you know, the new development matters does talk about the importance of curriculum, but I think it's, as educators and as responsive child-centered educators, we need to cultivate a curriculum where we're striving to create content that inspires children in your context and teaches children something they might not know yet, but we think is valuable for them to know. But like everything, it's just in the balance. It's not prescriptive, but it's delivered through that intent is important. It's delivered through play-based, for me, objective-led planning, project-based learning, where children are finding out, answering the questions or posing those questions for themselves. If you in your school, you might do IPC, and you will know there's a theme of chocolate. Now, I'll be honest, when I go into a school and they tell me they're doing chocolate, I do a bit of a grim. No, I love chocolate, nothing about chocolate, but of course children are interested in chocolate, yes. But is the question they want to ask about chocolate the one that's in that curriculum? Maybe not. I'm trying to think of an example. I know in one of my schools in England, a long time ago, we were developing inquiry-based learning, and we thought children would be really interested in emergency services. So that was a theme. And we had all the ideas, the plans that we were going to teach children, the questions we thought they'd ask. And as part of that, we invited a police officer to come in and a dog. And he brought the German Shepherd in. And we thought the children would ask these questions, and then we'll go into their research all about emergency services. What was their question about the dog? Not the ones we planned. Oh no, the dog was German. The most interesting thing was, what do you say to a German dog? What do you feed a German dog? It's Germany. What do they do? How do you contract? When was it born? How did it get here? That's the question. So it doesn't mean that as a curriculum map, we haven't considered all the skills and knowledge they need, but we do it their way. So I really don't want you to get an impression that I think, go back to the olden days when I first started teaching. But I think a curriculum in the balance is important. Maths is a really great example. When one of our schools in Hangzhou, if you went there, and I hope one day lots of you can come now that China's open, which is fantastic. The learning environments are phenomenal, beautiful, and inspirational. Women set the place up, and it's just lovely, very Reggio based. But when we started to assess children's level of mathematics, we realized assessment was that their data was low. Not because they're not mathematical, not because they can't do it, that we were relying on teachable moments to assess it. We weren't explicitly observing it or teaching it. Once we did that, woof, went right up on those data sheets. So progression, going, what do they need by the end of the project to be able to fly into the next phase, and planning that, but teaching in that very responsive fashion. We know children are naturally curious, and for me, that we've talked about the intent, that implementation, those teaching approaches linked to curriculum are vital. In terms of curiosity, I would say, learning comes, for me, deep level learning comes from a child's genuine interest in that subject. Ours does too. I occasionally give the example of skiing. I know skiing is meant to be a really good thing. I know it's very, it's a lovely part of the world, all those kind of things. I've tried it a few times. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I think it's dangerous. I'm scared. My family love it. They leave me in the cafe and they do their thing. But I'm not invested in it. I don't really want to do it. So it's no different as an adult, but as a child, when the young children, if you fight that part of their development, then it makes it difficult. So that curiosity is driven by what they are naturally interested in finding out about, and that goes back to knowing them. Fostering their curiosities. Use your parents, use your the people in your school as experts, as Reggio would call it. This one here, you can see the dressmaking. We had in one of our schools a parent who, being in China, being the schools they were in, who owned huge factories of manufacturing. But we then linked to that and talked about making clothes. And then we talked about tailoring. And of course, there were a few teachers in school, a few Chinese teachers who were fabulous dressmakers. Now, this was for 4-year-olds operating sewing machinery. And it was there, but they were taught it intently at first. Schools often ask me about the child-centered teacher-led balance. Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? When you're introducing a sewing machine, it's 100% teacher-led, okay? Then eventually it might get to 50-50. So the balance depends on the moment. The other one is our little 2-year-olds. I think that actually might have been our opening year, fascinated by the school bus. So don't fight it. It took them an age to get off it because they wanted to stay on it and investigate it and look at it. But because they hadn't been on a bus before, they all had drivers. They hadn't been on a bus. So again, that's a really good example of the curriculum filling those gaps of knowledge and of intent, but going with their natural curiosities. Now, project planning, I am a great fan. I will project planning in all different forms. It's not easy. Some of you will do it. Some of you have heard about it. Some of you would like to do it. Again, please get in touch. And it's not just me. I can link you to some of our educators who are very good at that. And some of our schools aren't there yet. It's the big thing about project planning is observing children, the bits they're interested in, the bits they're not, and then going with that, but mapping it to your curriculum. From those key components of phase 1, choosing your project focus according to your intent, research, field work, authentic, give it time. It's not just on a Tuesday morning around everything else. It's something that we revisit all the time, and using your environment to do that, down to that final representation, which is really important, documenting learning and making sure, again, that that's valued. It requires all of these things. Flexibility of timetable is a biggie, particularly in international independent schools, where if we're not careful, the day is split between PE in the morning, then music, then something else and something else. Really look at your timetable, think, do I need that? If I'm doing PE and it's right over the other side of the building, is there some way they can do it here? To expand the time that children have to really get into their projects. It's challenging. It's not easy. It needs really good training and a buy-in from your teachers and I put in there at the bottom, reporting to senior leads. Here I am again in a founding school. There'll be a great central file soon of the curriculum for all the different age groups. And I've been in project planning for new schools where the master or head teacher or principal has said, okay, so about early years. And the poor early years leaders said, oh, well, I've got a curriculum overview and a vision. And that's it. If you come to me in December, I'll tell you what we did. That retrospective kind of responsive planning can be quite hard for some people to understand, and for some people who review and inspect your schools. So think about how you articulate the impact of project planning, if that's the kind of approach you're going to use, to people who perhaps don't understand it. A part here on transition as well, there's often, if there's project planning in early years, there isn't a real project planning approach in year 1 and year 2. So think about that. I'm sure, if you are early years teachers or year 1 teachers who want to build on more about all the great stuff that goes in early years, project planning is a really good way to do it, to bridge those two age phases. But I will say a word of warning, it should look different in year 1, key stage 1, grade 1 and above than it does in early years. It's not the same. It should have a different, it should be at a higher level. That's very important also to convince people that it's effective. Continuous provision is a big part of project planning, which I'll talk about in a moment, because for children to be able to research into and find out about and represent what they know, they need open-ended materials on hand. For instance, I'll talk about something again. This was a school over in the Channel Islands, actually in Jersey. They were doing it, and they were talking about the Great Fire of London, and the children wanted to represent what they were learning through block play, through this magnificent, I can't tell you how great it was, set of block. It was London, and it, they did it on Monday, did it on Tuesday. It was allowed to be left. They came back. Imagine how fabulous that would be. But the only reason that could happen was because the open-ended materials were there. As with the best will in the world, for that teacher to have to go and find them would have been really difficult. So continuous provision is really important, and the level and the quality of that continuous provision. Documentation needs to be collaborative. Again, I've got lots of examples of great documentation from some of the schools I've visited and some of our schools, so please do ask me. It can be a wealth, in a wealth of ways. A little bit later on, we'll mention assessment. And, do we need to evidence children's learning? All those things that we were told we had to do for many years in early years, and now you're told absolutely don't do it. Documentation in this sense, which is a teaching tool as much as an evaluative tool, if you're monitoring the quality of teaching learning, as much as it's a reflective tool with you and your children and you and your parents, is a great way of doing that. So down to the learning environment. Now, again, I could spend at least a day on this, but I won't. On this, and I'm sure lots of you have bought into this and are doing this already. Oh my, it's important. And it's in most of the schools I'm in now and I'm visiting, most of them have absolutely embraced the concept of the learning environment being the third teacher, but it is only the third teacher if it does, if it does these things, if it reflects for me, these are the key ways that children learn. And it also doubles up, these are their predictable interests. So your continuous provision, that's the bread and butter. That's the same stuff in the same place every day. That's your supermarket. How annoying is it when you rush into your supermarket for a loaf of bread and they've moved it? Okay, we want it to be in the same place every day. But if you think about supermarkets and you go down the aisle, at the end, technical term, they have something called a gondola end. That's where they put something at the end that says, buy 2 sets of chocolate digestives and you get the 3rd free. Now, you weren't even going to buy 2, but it's so inviting and really you love them. And of course, it's a bargain, but that's how they draw you in. That's what enhancements to continuous provision are. But your continuous provision, same stuff, the same place every day. The stuff that you always have in your fridge, and I'm not going to ask, but the same stuff you always have in your fridge. And then at certain times of the year, you have a bit extra. That's the enhancement. That's the way your kitchen's designed. So this list is something I use as an audit tool, with not long audit tools, but saying, and think about that list, a really great set of blocks, a brilliant home corner will do all of those things. So you don't have to have a lot of it. You can just have some of it, but it's a really important list to use. Now, I will say, in terms of this, I like continuous provision to be tidy, clean, organised, aesthetically beautiful. That's top-notch learning environments in any age group, to be honest, but in early years. Children deserve that. I get quite stroppy, not that, and I promise you, if you aren't me at school, I won't do it face-to-face, but inside, I'm thinking, oh, come on. We've got to have a whole shelf there that's full of teacher stuff. It's not for the teacher, it's not for you, it's for them. Let's be respectful, not neglectful. But it's and it's another point on here is it's an aid, not an occupier. Our school in Bangkok has what they kind of learning village, like corridors, really big corridors in between the schools. It's only 5 years old, so it's not very old. And year 1 and year 2 were very keen to establish continuous provision for their children in their learning centres, learning villages. But they were so honest with me. They said, but it's not working. I know it's meant to be a really good thing. I know we're meant to do it, but I don't know, it's not working. It's because it was being an occupier. Children were in it, but they weren't learning from it, and they weren't embedding their learning. And it's much harder, as you will know, with year one than it is with a 2-year-old, because the 2 and 3-year-old, they're still in that awe and wonder stage. With a 5-6-year-old, they've been there and done it. So if you've got exactly the same kit that they had a year ago, then they will not be challenged enough. Equally, too much stuff is over challenging and it won't focus them. And the way where you position things, if you've got block play, if you've got small construction, please have small world play nearby. So there'll be some children who are at the stage where they love putting things together. There'll be other children who want to build a whole world. And if it's there and it hits them over the head, it's there, then it's possible. You know, my daughter was a great world builder. It would be all over the sitting room, but she didn't actually play in it. I mean, again, we talk about schema. The building of it was the important thing. It's a great way of avoiding hoovering completely, because I can't do it. But then other children don't know how to do it because they've never had it. So going back to adults supporting them to do that, but absolutely the cultural context of your school. When I first went to our Chinese schools, hand on heart, I'll be honest, there wasn't a pair of chopsticks in our role play area. So make sure children know what it is. Maths areas are often the areas that teachers will say are not used. And again, there's quite a lot of teacher resources in there, but not things which encourage children to calculate, measure, and take risks with in terms of numbers. And again, if you want an audit tool for your continuous provision, whether it's indoors, I haven't even touched on outdoors today, there's your audit. Does it support your curriculum content? And does it support learning behaviours? If you use the characteristics of effective learning, just do an audit on that. In terms of intent with our learning environments, I have put on, I'll be honest with you, one of my bugbears. Now, one of my bugbears are tough spots. I'm from Sheffield, so we used to call them Wix trays, because that's where you got them from. The tough spots that are full of stuff, because us as adults actually probably quite enjoy setting up a beautiful display of that one mini beast. It looks fantastic. Think about the intent of that. And almost always what happens is 1 or 2 children will come in, they'll move it around, and then it looks so messy afterwards, they go away again. I think they're great as containers, they're great as supporting continuous provision, but think about the intent. Now, the other one, for example, you would think is quite similar, but something like that is great in intentionally teaching, supporting narrative of story, perhaps. If you are a taught for writing school, if you're talking about story pathways, those great. But please think about the intent of the tough spot, of the containers that you use. And tough spots, perhaps with open-ended materials next to it, might be a different thing. So again, a bugbear if I'm coming to see a school. Okay, assessment. Assessment to me is fascinating, and my views on assessment have changed over the years, and I think assessment is something which is the kind of golden thread through your school. If your assessment approaches and what you assess, if what you assess reflects your values as an educator, then you're on the right pathway. If as an educator, again, the vision of your school is about well-being, it's about children being highly involved in their school, it's about character, it's about cross-curricular learning and planning, those approaches. And yet, when I see your data, you are showing me maths and English, or maths and I believe me, I've been in international independent schools where most children have English additional language and nobody tracks communication and language in real details post year 1. And if you're not tracking it and reporting it to the highest level, you know, think about your governance, think about your governors. This is somewhere that we have to raise the flag of these things and say, this is the most important thing. I was privileged at Wellington, China, that I did convince them, not sure if at first they really understood why, that reporting on wellbeing and involvement is the first thing we report on in any academic subcommittee meeting. And then we triangulate with that. Because if wellbeing's high, involvement's high, then quality of teaching is very good. And it won't be in some cases, in which case we have to triangulate with that. So, and that I talked earlier on about the mantra of what is it like to be a child here. The other one that's always stuck with me from, again, Ofsted training is tell me, show me, so what? And in any assessment conversation, whether it's with your colleague at the end of the day, whether it's with whoever you're reporting up to, someone reporting to you, is that tell me about your school, about your class, about how children are making progress. Contextually is really important as well. Data is not just numbers. Show me how you know. And in early years, that might be on your working walls, that might be in your learning stories, that might be in your narrative, it might be in numerical data, but show me how you know. And then hugely, so what? What are you going to do because of that? The reason people get really cross about data collection in any age group, but particularly in early years where everything else is full on recording, is because it's not impactful. And so, Matthew Savage again talks a lot. We did some work with him about nurturing data habits, making people that they can't wait to log on to whatever tracker you're using to see where things are. And I'm not a maths person, but I love data. It fascinates me. It throws questions up. And don't be afraid of those questions. But as long as, for me, I know a school's asking those questions because of the data, the system is sensible. And that bottom one there, I'm running out of time, is moderation versus standardization. They're two different things. Lots of people again say, this will be accurate because we moderate. Okay, well, has anyone standardized? Because what I think is a child who's reached that checkpoint might be different to you. Now, it doesn't mean, usually people agree, but standardization, particularly in international school where we have lots of different people coming into our schools every 2 years or so, is really important. For you to know a child confidently can do that thing or know something, particularly when we're working with younger children, what do you need to see? Take time to standardize before you moderate. Moderation is the second part of that. And talking about Mr. Savage, this is something that we're hoping to do with him about. He talks about treasure map, and the child's that we're going to look for the treasure. But hugely, you've got to think about what is treasure in your school. What do you value as treasure? What's developmentally vital for each group? Is it important they can do that? Or if they present it on a worksheet and their piece of written work follows a sentence starter and everyone has the same subject, does that mean the same thing to you as it does to somebody else? What's really important, and what are the systematic approaches and processes to enable for you to find that treasure in each child? I have put this in because this is important in early years. Responsible pedagogy. Don't rely on seeing children do something themselves before you say they can do it. Doesn't mean they can't do it. And there's nothing wrong with asking children questions and creating a situation whereby they show you what they know. Lots of children in this age group will not naturally want to go and write, for instance. Doesn't mean they can't do it. And there's nothing wrong with us as early years teachers and practitioners and leads setting up a situation where it's irresistible. And then we can find out whether they can do it or not. That's really, really crucial. Lumen scales, my go-to for most things. It's a clear set of standards and indicators, assesses the quality of teaching and learning in your offer as well as an individual children. Again, please contact me if you want more information, and I'm very happy to share what we do. It's something now we do cross-group, and we're taking up to year 2. Nearly finished. I'll skip a few, but I'll let you have the slides. Recording and evidence in early years absolutely is a thing that we worry about. And I would say if you get it right, one tool will do all. And just ask you those questions. Is it having an impact? And don't be afraid if the reason you are writing learning stories is because it really engages parents. That's a great reason. When my little girl when she was very young, and I got a lovely learning story about her doing yoga when she was 2, I didn't sit there, even what I do, and think, oh, I wonder what age and stage she's at. I just smiled because it's great. And that's a really way of me connecting with them as a school. So don't be if that's why you do it, great, sing that from the rooftops. Learning stories, huge fan of real authentic learning stories where the child's the main character. It's a narrative about them, and I would do one maybe 2 or 3 excerpts like this across a term, not a lot. They have to be meaningful. It has to be about process and not product. So back to our responsibility. You know, we do really have a responsibility as educators to enable children to thrive hugely. And I think more and more, and I am super proud and pleased to be associated with an organisation like ECIS, because you guys are at the forefront of this. This is not a trend. This is something we have to foster, these attitudes in our youngest children, our educators and our families. You know, I work with, but actually my daughter has lots of friends of that age, 19, 20, and they are loud about this and great. And if, you know, someone, unfortunately, one of my friends will say to her and her friends, well, I don't know about he, she, them, it's a bit clumsy. And then she'll say, well, learn then. This is really important. It's important to our children now, and it's important to them as the future citizens. As my friend Yanda Beale would say, they're the ones who'll be looking after us in our old age. So, you know, let's try and get it right. Okay, there's me. Sarah, I've tweaked these slightly, so I will send you these slides. I'm very happy for you to send us a PDF and people to use. Let's share. You guys will be doing great stuff already, and the people in my schools would love to share it. And I visit lots of other schools, so please invite me, and if I'm in the area, I'd love to come and play. Okay, thank you.
Fiona, thank you so very, very much, and congratulations on recovering so elegantly. Us all having gone out for a quick tea break for a minute. Absolutely fabulous to have this hour together. I'm going to take away the idea of the hot pebbles and the cold pebbles as something which I adore, but your heat lamp image will stay, I think, with all of us as well. You know, who's where on that spectrum, and just and that lovely question of what's it like to be a child here encapsulates what you've been talking about for the last hour. Thank you very, very much for sharing with us. We look forward to receiving the slides that we can send to people that were here today, and we look forward to our continued partnership with you and the work of the Early Childhood Special Interest Group. You're on the committee. Lindsay, as I said at the beginning, our chair of the committee here today, John O'Toole. Thank you all very, very much, and here's to the next time.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.